Elise Grant stood at the edge of the long winding driveway, her shoes soaked from the rain and her suitcase dripping onto the manicured gravel. Behind her, the black town car pulled away without a word. No goodbye from her father. No instructions. Just the cold slap of wind and the looming presence of a mansion she'd never seen before. She didn't know exactly why she was here. Her father had simply said, "You want to grow up, then earn it." Then shoved a duffel bag into her arms and told the driver to go. Elise thought maybe it was a retreat, maybe a chance to learn something new. But the silence of the estate didn't feel like education. It felt like exile. The mansion door opened before she could knock. A woman in a gray blazer and tightly pinned hair looked her up and down without hiding the disapproval in her eyes. "You're the new night cleaner," the woman said, not asking. "Follow me. No wandering. No talking to residents unless addressed. You will clean the lower levels and staff corridors. You will not be seen." Elise wanted to ask something, anything, but the words died in her throat. She simply followed. The hallways inside the mansion were endless, glowing in golden tones, filled with quiet wealth and cold emptiness. Paintings taller than her lined the walls. Marble floors echoed each step. She felt like an intruder in a museum. The woman led her down a narrow staircase and opened a metal door at the end. A small room with no windows, a cot, a metal locker, and a plastic shelf of folded uniforms. "Uniforms are laundered weekly. You'll begin in 20 minutes. Mop the south hall first, then laundry chute, then staff kitchen. Someone will bring you the list. Do not fall behind. If you're not working, you're not welcome." Then the door shut behind her. Elise stood there stunned. The air smelled like bleach and old rubber. She looked down at her clothes, her oversized hoodie already stained from the cab ride, and suddenly felt very small. She tried to shake off the fear. Maybe this was a test. Maybe her father had arranged some kind of tough love training program. But deep down, she knew better. Walter Grant had always been ashamed of her. Her body, her weight, her softness. He spoke to her in clipped commands, only smiled when cameras were around, and used words like discipline and accountability, like other fathers used affection. She'd grown up in silence, surviving on books and food. Both were safer than people. And now he'd sent her here. At 11:00 sharp, a knock on her door startled her. A young man in a uniform handed her a printed list and a mop. He didn't speak, just nodded and walked off. Elise changed into the navy blue work shirt and pants that barely fit around her thighs. Her reflection in the metal locker door showed red cheeks, damp curls, and fear she couldn't hide. But she moved, because there was nowhere else to go. By midnight, she had cleaned 3 bathrooms, 2 hallways, and was scrubbing the corners of the staff kitchen floor when she heard a voice. "Watch your step." She turned too fast, slipped slightly, and the mop handle clattered to the ground. A tall man in dark slacks and a loose button-down stood by the pantry holding a glass of water. His sleeves were rolled. His hair tousled like he'd been working late. "Sorry," Elise mumbled, lowering her eyes. He bent to pick up the mop for her. "Careful. That corner's slick when the fridge leaks," he said. Then paused. "You knew." She nodded, not looking up. He didn't press. Just offered a faint smile and walked out, the sound of his shoes fading into the marble hallway. She didn't know his name. Didn't realize she'd just spoken to Roman Cade, the man who owned the mansion. The man who had unknowingly received her as a gift of shame from her own father. All she knew was that he hadn't looked at her like the others. Not like something broken. Not yet. And that for some reason made her heart ache more. Elise learned quickly that in a house like this, the key to survival was silence. No questions, no opinions, no trace. She became part of the background, the flicker of movement in a hallway, the footsteps after midnight, the soft sound of cleaning spray before dawn. No one asked her name. No one cared. Days blended into nights, and her world shrank to corridors and checklists. She woke before the sun cleaned until her fingers pruned and fell asleep with the scent of disinfectant in her hair. The schedule was strict, the supervisors colder than the marble walls. Adele, the head of staff, seemed to enjoy watching Elise flinch. "Don't touch the grand piano room," Adele warned one morning. "Don't speak to the guests. And don't ever go near the West Wing. Mr. Cade values discretion." Elise nodded without responding. She had no intention of going anywhere she wasn't told, but sometimes she still saw him. Roman Cade moved like someone who didn't have to apologize for existing. He wasn't loud. He didn't throw orders or demand attention. He simply passed through the house like it belonged to him, which of course it did. His face was in magazines, his name attached to buildings downtown. Yet in person, he felt more like a storm that had grown quiet, not because it was over, but because it was waiting. Elise saw him at odd times leaving the gym with his shirt clinging to his back, walking through the garden at dusk, standing alone in the empty dining room, with a file in hand. He never said much, but he always noticed her, not in a predatory way, more like curiosity. Once she was stacking trays in the staff kitchen when she heard footsteps. She turned, startled. It was him. He didn't speak at first, just walked to the coffee maker, filled a mug, then glanced at her. "You made the chili yesterday?" he asked. She froze. Yes, sir. Leftovers, I didn't want them to go to waste. It was better than the catered meal," he said simply, then walked off. She stared after him, stunned. It wasn't praise. Not really. But it was the first time anyone in that house had spoken to her like she mattered. The next day, someone restocked the kitchen with fresh garlic and cumin. She hadn't requested them, but they were there. Elise began to pay closer attention. He worked late into the night and rarely smiled. He seemed alone despite being surrounded by people who moved when he breathed. And once when she dropped a stack of silverware and crouched to gather them, she caught him watching, not with judgment, but with something close to concern. She didn't understand it. She didn't trust it, because she knew the truth. She wasn't here by accident. Her father hadn't sent her away to learn responsibility. He had bartered her, given her to the man he lost a deal to under the guise of a helping hand. And whether Roman knew or not, Elise was still a tool, an invisible one. And invisible people didn't get kindness, not unless it cost something. So when she started finding little things, extra apples in the staff fridge, warm towels folded more neatly, a better mop left in her supply closet, she tried not to hope. But hope had a way of creeping in even through cracks in concrete. One night she worked late cleaning the back parlor. A storm had rolled in, thunder rattling the windows. As she wrung out a mop, the lights flickered. Then the door opened. It was him. Roman stepped inside, holding a book in one hand, rubbing his temple with the other. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said. "You're not," she replied quickly, gripping the mop tighter. He glanced at her. "You always clean this room." She shook her head. "Rotates weekly. I just got it tonight." He nodded, then paused at the fireplace where fresh logs were stacked neatly. "Did you restock these?" "Yes." He looked at her, then not past her, not through her, at her. "You notice everything, don't you?" She didn't answer, but her hands trembled slightly. He smiled, small, almost sad. "That's rare." Then he left, and Elise stood in the silence of the parlor, unsure if her chest hurt because she was scared, or because someone had finally seen her. Elise no longer looked at her reflection in the locker mirror. There was no point. The uniform still pulled tight around her stomach. Her cheeks were still flushed after 2 flights of stairs. The strands of hair that curled around her face after long hours still refused to obey any comb. But something had shifted. It wasn't visible. Not exactly. But she felt it in the way she stood a little straighter when walking past Adele. In the way she prepared the staff breakfast with more care, slicing fruit thinner, arranging it neater. And most of all in the way her eyes searched for Roman without meaning to. She told herself it was nothing. Just gratitude. Maybe curiosity. But when his footsteps echoed down the hallway, her heart always responded first, quicker, louder, before her mind could catch up. Roman didn't speak much. But when he did, his words settled. He asked about the smell in the laundry hall, and when she mentioned a leak, it was fixed within a day. He commented on the music in the East Wing, and the next night she found a note on her cart. "You pick better playlists than our events team." He even started leaving his empty coffee mugs in the kitchen instead of tossing them in trash bins. She suspected it was an excuse. One night, long past midnight, Elise was folding linen in the back hall when he appeared again. No shoes, just socks on polished wood floors, a half-unbuttoned shirt, and tired eyes. "Still working?" he asked. "Always," she said before she could stop herself. He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Must be exhausting." She shrugged. "It's easier when there's no one around." His gaze held hers a beat longer than usual. Then he looked down at the pile of folded sheets. "You're the only person in this house who doesn't flinch when I walk in." She blinked. "Why would I flinch?" He didn't answer. Instead, he sat on the low bench beside her supply cart, his fingers absently brushing the edge of the folded linen. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, just there. "Can I ask something?" he said quietly. Elise nodded. "Why do you do all this so precisely, so carefully? Most people would do the bare minimum in your position." Her fingers froze over a pillowcase. She looked up. "Because no one ever expected anything from me," she said. "And now that no one's watching, I want to see what I can actually do." Roman didn't move, but something shifted in his face. He leaned back slightly, letting that answer settle in the room. "That's a better reason than most people I know." He stood, straightened his shirt, and nodded once. "Good night, Elise." It was the first time he said her name. She whispered, "Good night, Mr. Cade," after he'd already left. She barely slept that morning. The next week, everything felt different. Her workload didn't change. Her routine didn't ease. Adele was still clipped and cold, but the edges around her life softened. Staff began greeting her. Someone left an extra protein bar in the fridge with a sticky note that read, "Try this." And in the evenings, Roman's presence became familiar, expected even. Then, on a Thursday, she found something on her cleaning cart. A book. Not just any book. The same memoir she once mentioned in passing while stacking dishware near Roman's office. He'd asked what her favorite line was. She quoted it from memory. "People don't disappear when they're unseen. They simply wait to be noticed." Now it sat on her cart, bookmarked at that exact line. Her breath caught. She looked around, half expecting him to appear from a hallway. But he didn't. Just the distant hum of a dishwasher and the soft clink of glass. She took the book to her room, held it like something fragile, and sat on her cot in silence. That night, Elise wrote in her journal for the first time in weeks. "I think he sees me, not as a favor, not as a burden, just me." She didn't know what that meant, but she knew how it made her feel. And for someone who had spent her whole life hiding from mirrors, that feeling was everything. The next morning began like any other. Elise woke before dawn, dressed in silence, and walked the long hallway toward the staff kitchen. But as she passed the east courtyard, she noticed something unusual. A vase of fresh sunflowers placed on the marble stand near the window. Sunflowers, her favorite. She had mentioned it once in a passing comment while refilling Roman's tea. Elise Adele's voice sliced through her thoughts. "You're scheduled to clean the West Library today. Mr. Cade won't be home until evening, so finish before then." Elise stiffened. The West Library was usually off limits. She nodded without question and headed there as instructed. The library was different from the rest of the mansion. Warmer. Wood-paneled walls, worn leather chairs, soft amber lights. She felt like she was trespassing inside someone's thoughts. Dusting the shelves, she found a framed photograph Roman as a teenager beside an older man. Same dark hair, same haunted eyes. There was something lonely in both of them, even in a still image. Her fingers hesitated near the photo, then moved on. She didn't hear him come in. "You like that one?" Roman's voice was low. She jumped, nearly dropping the duster. I'm sorry," she stammered. I didn't mean to touch anything." He waved it off and stepped closer. "That was my father," he said, nodding toward the frame. "He built the company. I was expected to build the empire." Elise didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. Roman folded his arms, leaned against the desk. "You remind me of him, actually. Not the empire part. The quiet persistence." Elise looked down, unsure whether to take that as compliment or burden. He continued, his tone softer. "He used to say, 'The people who do the real work are always in the background, and usually they're the ones holding everything together.'" She smiled faintly. "Sounds like he noticed the invisible." Roman studied her. "That's the thing," he said. "You've never been invisible. You've just been surrounded by people who refuse to look." Her breath caught. She wasn't sure how much of her heart was left to unearth, but in that moment something raw surfaced. The little girl who once hid behind oversized jackets, the teenager who deleted every selfie before hitting send, the woman who convinced herself she wasn't worth being seen, and now this man, the one who technically owned the house, the one who was never supposed to know who she really was. He looked at her as if he'd always known. She cleared her throat. "I should finish up here." He nodded once. "Of course." But as she moved past him toward the door, he spoke again. "Elise." She turned. "If you ever want to talk, not as staff, just as you, I'd listen." She couldn't answer, not with words. She simply nodded, turned away quickly, and walked back into the hallway, where no one would see her crying. That night her journal entry was short. "Today, someone saw me," and didn't flinch. For the first time since arriving, she left her door cracked open while she slept. Just a little. Not because she expected anyone, but because maybe, just maybe, she was done hiding. Elise woke to a knock she hadn't expected. It was Adele. Clipboard in hand, lips thin. "Mr. Cade wishes to speak with you," she said. "In the greenhouse. Now." Elise's stomach dropped. No explanation. No context. Her mind raced with all the possibilities. Had she crossed a line? Had someone discovered who she really was? She washed her face quickly and changed into the cleanest uniform she had. Her hands shook as she buttoned the collar. The last time someone in power had summoned her without warning, her life had changed. And not for the better. The greenhouse sat behind the west garden, tucked beyond the stone wall. She had never been allowed back there before. Walking through the wrought iron gate, she found Roman standing alone among the ivy and glass. His back turned, sleeves rolled. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," Elise said quickly. If I touched something I shouldn't." Roman turned to face her, and his expression silenced her. "No," he said. "It's not that." He motioned toward a bench. She sat slowly, trying not to appear too nervous, though her palms were slick. He sat across from her, elbows on his knees. "I need to tell you something," he began. "And I need you to hear it from me before anyone else does." She blinked. "Okay." Roman took a long breath. "Your father, Walter Grant." Her chest tightened. "I know who you are," he said gently. "I've known for about a week." The words fell like bricks. Elise didn't move, didn't breathe. "I didn't know at first," he continued. "When you arrived, I assumed you were just another temp hire. But then, small things, your last name, the way Adele reacted to you, a few connections. She felt exposed, as if every layer she had carefully built in this house had been peeled back in an instant. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't ask to come here. He didn't tell me anything. He said I needed to grow up." Roman didn't interrupt. "I thought maybe it was training. Or some kind of cruel lesson," she continued, voice shaking. "I didn't know that he'd given me away like a piece of furniture." "He did," Roman said softly. "He offered you like a bargaining chip after losing a merger. Said he could make it up by giving me his daughter quietly, discreetly. Like you were a problem he didn't want to look at anymore. Tears burned behind Elise's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I was never supposed to use that offer, Roman said. I never wanted it. But you were already here before I even replied. She finally looked at him. Then why let me stay? Because I saw you, he said. Before I knew anything. Before your name meant something. I saw the way you moved through this place. Invisible, yes, but not broken, not bitter, just surviving. Elise pressed a hand to her mouth. I should have told you sooner, he added. But I didn't know how. And the more I watched you, the less it felt like something to confront and more like something I didn't want to ruin. Her voice came out in a whisper. Am I still just a trade to you? Roman's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, meeting her eyes. You were never a trade. Not to me. Not for a second. The silence between them pulsed. I don't know what happens next, she said, her voice cracking. Whatever you want, he said. You can leave. Right now. I'll have Adele pack your things. Or you can stay. Not as a maid. Not as an employee. Just as you. Elise stood unsteady. I need to think. He nodded, respectful. No pressure. No pity. As she walked back toward the mansion, her thoughts collided. Hurt, anger, confusion. But underneath all of it, one truth glowed like an ember. He could have owned her, but he didn't. He let her choose, and for a woman who'd never had a say in her own story that meant more than love ever could, Elise didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her cot, staring at the pale glow of the hallway light leaking under her door. The room felt smaller than ever, the ceiling lower, the walls closer. Her uniform lay folded at her feet like an old skin she wasn't sure she belonged to anymore. By morning, she had made a decision. She packed slowly. Not everything, just what she'd brought. The hoodie from her first night. The journal she hadn't let anyone see. The book Roman had left on her cart. When Adele saw her walking through the staff corridor with her duffel, she didn't ask where she was going. She only raised an eyebrow and turned away. Maybe she'd known it would end like this. Maybe she'd hoped it would. Roman was waiting in the front atrium. No suit today. Just dark jeans and a navy sweater, like someone trying not to be important. I'm not staying, Elise said before he could speak. He nodded, not surprised. But I'm not leaving to run away, she added. I just need to understand who I am outside of here. Outside of being invisible or noticed or bartered. His jaw tensed, but he didn't argue. Do you want help? He asked quietly. No, she said. Not yet. I need to know I can help myself. He stepped forward, pulling something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper. I had it drafted last night, in case you decided to go. She opened it. A check, her name, no note attached. I can't take this, she said. You're not, he replied. You're earning it, with your voice. She looked up. Your blog, he explained. I found it. You write about things most people are afraid to say out loud. And I know people who need to hear it. I want to fund a platform for it. If you say yes. Her throat tightened. It wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was a door. I'll think about it, she said. He smiled. That's all I ask. She walked out of the mansion with nothing but her bag and her breath, but somehow it felt like more than she had ever carried. Back in the city, she rented a small apartment above a bookstore. Nothing glamorous, just hers. She cooked her own meals, walked to the corner cafe every morning and wrote every night. At first, just for herself. Then slowly, she returned to the blog. The post she shared a week later was titled, What Happens When You're Given Away? It was raw, honest. No names, no scandal. Just a story about a girl who was told she was too much, and a man who finally said she was enough. It went viral in 3 days. Readers flooded the comment section. Women who had been dismissed, daughters disowned, people who knew what it felt like to be offered up as something less than whole. Roman didn't call. He didn't show up. But she knew he was watching quietly, respectfully, the way he always had. Then one evening, a letter arrived at her apartment. No return address. Just a single line inside, "I didn't fall for you because you were brave. I fell for you because you were real." She held the note to her chest. For once, her tears weren't from shame. They were from being seen and finally being free. 2 weeks later, Elise received an envelope that changed everything. It was hand-delivered, thick and cream-colored, with her full name printed in elegant lettering. Inside was a formal notice her father's estate was under legal dispute. Walter Grant had passed away. She sat still for a long time, reading the lines again and again. There was no grief, just a hollow silence. Her father, the man who had handed her off like property, was gone, and with him the tangled web of expectations and disappointment she had carried her whole life. The following morning she met with a probate attorney in a high-rise office downtown. The man was polite but brisk. "Your father's debts are substantial," he said, "but you've inherited more than enough to cover them if you choose to accept the estate. If not, the assets will be seized and sold." Elise flipped through the documents. Properties, investments, shell companies, and among them something that made her breath pause, a clause stating the private agreement with Roman Cade had been recorded and could be disclosed to the media in case of litigation. In other words, her father had protected himself by leaving behind a paper trail that could ruin Roman's name. Her stomach turned. That night she didn't sleep. She paced the floor, phone in hand, debating whether to call Roman, but she knew what he would say. "You get to choose." So she did. Elise drafted a statement. Not a denial, not a cover-up, just the truth. She contacted the same podcast that had once invited her to speak about body image. This time she told the whole story, how she had been gifted without her knowledge, how shame became silence, and how a stranger's quiet kindness helped her reclaim her voice. The episode aired within days, and people listened. Not out of pity, but because it was real. She wasn't a victim seeking sympathy. She was a woman standing on the wreckage of her past, saying, "I am still here." Support poured in from everywhere. Messages from women in shelters, daughters, estranged from their families, even men admitting they had overlooked people like Elise their entire lives. The media tried to twist the story. Headlines screamed for scandal, "Billionaire accepted woman as gift in secret deal." But no one could make the truth disappear once Elise had spoken it herself. Roman texted her the night the story aired. No small talk. Just, "You didn't owe me that, but I've never been more proud of anyone." She stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "I didn't say it for you. I said it for me." But she smiled when she hit send. In the days that followed, Elise announced the launch of a foundation in her father's name, but not to honor him. Instead, it would serve women recovering from emotional abuse, coercion, and shame related to body image. A safe space for those told they weren't enough. A platform where being seen didn't come at the cost of survival. Roman never tried to take credit. He stayed in the background, sending resources, quietly helping her vet nonprofit partners, forwarding connections without attaching his name. And Elise never asked for more than that, because now she didn't need someone to fix her life. She was fixing it herself. And for the first time, she was doing it not to prove a point, not to earn love, but simply because she knew she deserved it. Summer came slowly to the city. The parks filled with music again. The corners smelled of roasted nuts and car exhaust, and Elise's apartment no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like a beginning. She spent most mornings at the foundation's new office, a modest space above a daycare where sunlight spilled through cracked windows, and volunteers laughed over too strong coffee. They weren't building an empire. They were building something softer, something necessary. One afternoon, while sorting intake forms, she looked up to find Roman standing in the doorway. No warning, no entourage, just him. He held 2 paper cups of coffee, a shy grin tugging at his mouth. "I figured if I waited for you to call, I might grow old," he said. Elise stood slowly, heart thudding. "I didn't know if you wanted me to," she said honestly. I didn't want to interfere, he replied. But I've missed interfering. Just a little. She stepped toward him, the distance between them shrinking until it was just space and breath and memory. You look different, he said, studying her. I feel different. He held out one of the coffees. Still drink it black? I never did, she said, taking it. I just didn't want to ask for sugar back then. He chuckled, then grew quiet. Can I take you to dinner? He asked. Not to talk about the past, just to know you again. Elise tilted her head. You already know me. I know the version who scrubbed floors and read in broom closets, he said. I want to know the one who changes lives before breakfast. She hesitated, not out of doubt, but because this moment was hers to choose. Not a push, not a bargain, a choice. And for once it didn't scare her. I get off at 5, she said. But I'm warning you, I eat like someone who's stopped apologizing for being hungry. He smiled, something quiet and unguarded. Good, he said. I've been starving for something real. That evening they didn't go anywhere fancy. Just a small diner where the waitress knew Elise by name and brought extra napkins without asking. They talked about little things, favorite movies, the worst places they'd ever cried, the best smells in the world. And somewhere between dessert and the last refill of tea, Roman reached across the table. You don't owe me anything, he said. But if there's room for me in your world just as I am, I'd like to be part of it. She looked at his hand, then at her own. Then she said the simplest truth she had. There's always been room. I just had to make some for myself first. They didn't kiss that night. They walked, past old buildings and streetlights, and the kind of silence that no longer needed to hide anything. Because love wasn't the grand gesture her father thought could fix everything. It was this. Two people choosing each other not out of need but out of recognition. And Elise for the first time walked beside someone not to catch up or be rescued, but because they were finally going in the same direction. Months passed, but nothing faded. If anything, life only deepened. Elise kept building the foundation. It grew from 1 office to 3. From whispered stories in hallways to full conferences where women stood up, cried out, and were heard. She traveled to speak. Not as someone who had been given away, but as someone who had taken her story back. Roman was there, always just close enough to support, but never close enough to overshadow. He sat in the back of every major event, never requested introductions, and always disappeared before the cameras started flashing. He never asked to be seen. But Elise saw him. One chilly October evening, they returned from a speaking event in Chicago. She kicked off her shoes in his penthouse, no longer intimidating, no longer hollow, and sat on the floor eating Chinese takeout while he scrolled through his phone. There's something you should know, he said after a while, his tone shifting. She looked up. I'm stepping down from the board. She blinked. Of Cade International. He nodded. I've been running it since I was 23. I think I finally understand that being powerful doesn't mean being present. Elise leaned back against the couch, absorbing the weight of it. What will you do? I don't know, he admitted. Something quieter. Something slower. Maybe I'll write. Maybe I'll learn how to burn toast like you. She laughed, tossing a napkin at him. My toast is perfectly charred. It's called depth. He caught the napkin, grinning, then grew serious again. I want to be more than the man who found you, he said. I want to be the man who stands next to you. Always. Even if no one notices. Elise put down her box of noodles. I don't need a savior, Roman. I know, he said. That's why I fell in love with you. She looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't a myth anymore. Not the man from headlines or the quiet figure in the library. He was just a man. Trying. Learning. Letting go of control in a world that had taught him to never loosen his grip. She reached for his hand. You didn't fall in love with who I was when I arrived, she said. You fell in love with who I became when I stopped apologizing for existing. And that, he replied, is the only version I ever want. They didn't need more words that night. They curled up on the couch, surrounded by city lights, takeout cartons, and the soft hum of traffic below. There were no vows, no sweeping gestures, just two people who had been broken by the world in different ways, choosing quietly, powerfully not to break each other. Later, as Elise looked out the window at the skyline, she remembered the first night she stood outside his mansion soaking wet and full of fear. And now here she was, still standing, still her, but no longer invisible, and no longer alone. Spring arrived in quiet ways. The sun lingered a little longer in the evenings. The windows in Elise's new office opened to a view of a school playground where laughter echoed even after hours. And inside her own life, something softer bloomed, something not born from fear or survival, but from choice. Love didn't arrive in declarations or glittering rings. It arrived in small things. In Roman brewing her tea the way she liked it without ever needing to ask. In Elise reading over his draft essays with a red pen, teasing him about his dramatic metaphors. In the way they folded laundry together, argued about the right pizza toppings, and navigated silence like it was familiar territory, not an enemy, but a friend. They didn't move in right away. Instead, they created space for each other gradually. Elise kept her apartment above the bookstore. Roman still spent weekends in the mansion, though. Now it was filled with light noise and laughter, especially when he let Elise bring in volunteers for retreats and workshops. The rooms that had once been off limits were now open. The hallway where Elise first mopped in silence was now lined with framed photos, women from the foundation smiling, standing tall, each with a quote underneath, not about survival, but about voice. At the annual fundraising gala, Roman stood behind the scenes while Elise took the stage. Her voice, steady and unshaken, echoed across the ballroom. "I was once the girl no one wanted to claim," she said. "I was told I took up too much space, made too much noise, felt too deeply. But now I know those are not weaknesses. They are the proof I am alive." The room erupted in applause. Later that night on the rooftop, Roman pulled her close. "You know," he said, "I used to think love meant shielding someone, keeping them safe out of the storm." She looked at him, eyebrow raised. "And now I know love means standing beside someone as they walk into it." Elise smiled. "Good, because I'm not done walking." They stood there a long time looking out over the city. Two people once broken in different ways, now holding the pieces with steady hands. Eventually Roman took her hand and pressed something into her palm. It wasn't a ring. It was a key. "To the house," he said quietly. "It's yours. Ours. But only if you ever want it to be." Elise looked down at the key, then up at him. "I don't need the house," she said. "I just need the man who stopped seeing me as weight to carry and started walking beside me." He kissed her. Then, not as a billionaire, not as the man who once received her as a transaction, but as the man who chose her wholly and without conditions. And Elise, she chose him back, not because she needed saving, but because finally she knew. She had saved herself first, and that made all the difference.